At any one time, there are an estimated 70 conflicts happening around the world. Conflict occurs when people have different principles or a clash of ideals. Some are wars fought between countries, while others, known as civil wars, involve fighting between different factions within the same country. Global conflicts rarely have a good outcome. They usually involve destruction, injury, and death. So, why would anyone choose conflict or war? In this programme, we'll look at the causes of global conflict and try to understand why it occurs. The causes of conflict have barely changed throughout history. It's the same old story. Desire for resources and land, power and politics, religion and cultural differences, and sometimes the necessity that's born from poverty or injustice. One of the most common causes of war is the desire to control resources. Resources are the natural assets of a country, and the ones fought over are generally water, land, minerals and people. A country's economic wealth depends on its resources and how those resources benefit the nation. Resources can mean different things to different people. Some people might value a forest for its beauty and the clean air it provides. Some desire it for the animals that might live near it or for the wood it provides. Others are only interested in the land it grows on. But some people can't see the wood or the trees. They want what's underneath it. They want oil, and it's a resource they're willing to fight for. Our world is very dependent on oil as an energy source. Oil byproducts are used in everything from lipstick to detergent, but the main use of oil is in machinery and, of course, cars. The industrialized world has the highest rate of car ownership, but emerging economies are catching up fast. China alone expects car ownership to increase by 67% between 2006 and the year 2010. India's demand is also growing rapidly. As our global dependence on oil increases, it puts pressure on supplies. Saudi Arabia and Russia are the two biggest exporters of oil. Their vast surpluses gives them energy security for their own future and bargaining power. The United States uses more oil than it produces, creating energy deficit. To secure oil supplies, the US needs to stay on good terms with oil-wealthy countries or risk going to war. Several industrialized countries have depleted their own resources and have begun looking further afield in countries like Sudan and Nigeria for more. Oil production should be a good thing for developing countries as it brings wealth to a nation. But often these countries lack the capital and technology to set up their own drilling operations. Enter transnational corporations, or TNCs. They do help emerging countries produce oil, but at a high cost. TNCs are known for taking a very large slice of the profit in return for their investment. There are other economic downsides to drilling oil. An influx of labour can inflate local housing pricing and make it unaffordable. It's often trained immigrants who earn the good money, and TNCs siphon the profits out of the country. This creates a gap between rich oil workers and poor indigenous population, which in turn creates resentment. In Nigeria, disgruntled militia stole $3 billion of crude oil from TNC oil pipelines in the space of 7 months. Stolen oil creates a black market for oil, and profits are often used to fund weapons to help steal more oil. It creates a cycle of conflict. The Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, or BTC, is a political hot potato. It spans 1,000 miles through Azerbaijan, Georgia and Turkey, and is mostly funded by Western TNCs. There have already been many attempts to steal oil from the BTC. Russia believes that the West will use this as an excuse to station troops in these three countries, escalating tension between Russia and the West. Oil supplies are already running low in some areas, and current output levels are not sustainable. Eventually, it'll all run out. So far, we have no equivalent energy source to replace it, so it's likely that the biggest global conflicts over oil are yet to come. Oil is not in unlimited supply. It is a finite resource, meaning it will run out. Oil causes conflict. Land disputes are as old as mankind itself. On an island, it's easy to see where borders lie. But in large land masses, borders are constantly debated and fought over. There are various degrees of conflict between regions. Annexation is the inclusion of one land in another's borders. Usually, a more powerful country absorbs a smaller one. Russia annexed part of Georgia in 2008. Some suggest it's because of the proximity to the BTC oil pipeline. Occupation is when one country sends in military forces and controls the other country according to their own rules. Invasion is old-fashioned war, but it's no longer simple. Modern conflicts often force the international community to participate. India and Pakistan have a history of religious and political differences. These manifest themselves as conflict over land, with both countries claiming equal rights over Kashmir. Both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons. A war between them could quickly escalate into world war as other countries take sides. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict is a different kind of land war. The State of Israel was set up inside Palestinian territory just after the Second World War. As Israel's demand for housing increased, its army began expanding its territory by forcing civilian Palestinians from their land, particularly on the West Bank and in Gaza. In 2003, American student Rachel Corrie volunteered as part of a peaceful protest organized by the International Solidarity Movement, or ISM. The volunteers placed themselves deliberately between bulldozers and Palestinian homes to act as human shields. Although this tactic had been successful many times before, Rachel was killed by an Israeli defense bulldozer whilst trying to defend a home in Gaza. Rachel's death increased global awareness of the issue, but the conflict continues. Palestinians continue to resist Israeli occupation and have resorted to terrorist activities such as suicide bombing. Israel retaliates. When land conflicts reach this kind of stalemate, peace talks can sometimes be negotiated by IGOs like the United Nations or other countries. However, some countries that join in peace talks are not neutral. In the case of conflict between China and Nepal, the United States supports the Nepal side, whilst many other countries sympathize with China. Fortunately, neutral NGOs and charity groups avoid taking sides politically, as they work in conflict zones to provide medical assistance and aid.
We don't take sides in a conflict. We're not interested in the political objectives of one side or another. The only thing that we're interested in is providing medical assistance to the people who need it. An example of somewhere that we deliberately choose to work in different parts of the country in order to demonstrate that we're neutral and that we're not taking sides is Somalia. So there is a town in mid-Somalia called Galkayo, And there is a front line that runs straight through the middle of the town, with one clan to the north of the line and one clan to the south of the line. Those two clans are at war. And we took a deliberate decision to work on both sides of that front line, one side in a hospital, the other side working in primary healthcare centres, so that we could say to the two communities, look, we are neutral, we're not taking sides, all we're doing is providing assistance on both sides of this front line. We really are just doctors and nurses doing what we say we do, which is providing medical assistance.
Sometimes it is citizens of a country who instigate conflict, not leaders or military. This is most often the case if there is injustice. Sometimes conflict stems from a basic need for food and safety. More of that in a moment. Leaders sometimes have their own personal agendas for going to war. They can have political, religious, or personal motives for leading their countries into war. When leaders don't understand another culture, they often fear it and want to dominate it. In extreme cases, some people want to eliminate different cultures altogether. This is known as genocide, and it has happened repeatedly throughout history. It is still happening today, even though it is strictly against international law. In 1995, 8,000 men and boys were killed in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the Srebrenica massacre because they were Muslim. In 1994, it is estimated that between 800,000 and 1 million people were killed in Rwanda during the Rwandan genocide. That stemmed from deep ideological differences between two groups. In total, 20% of the Rwandan population lost their lives. Land conflicts can be over resources, basic necessity, or cultural differences and religion.
Sudan is Africa's biggest and most troubled country. The reasons are complex.
Trouble started when extended drought in the Darfur region forced Muslim tribal grazers south, which started a north-south conflict over arable land. The Muslim government, keen to impose Islam on the Christian south, persecuted and tortured many who refused to convert. Newfound wealth through oil drilling hasn't helped. Instead of sharing the oil wealth of Darfur with its people, the corrupt government has been slaughtering farmers and evicting them so the land is cleared for further drilling. The UN estimates up to 300,000 people have been massacred by government troops or ethnic militia. The combination of drought and war over years has forced massive population displacements. 2.5 million refugees have either crossed the border into Chad or are living in camps in Darfur. This sorely tests relations with Chad. Widespread food shortages mean they rely on aid from NGOs such as Médecins Sans Frontières.
For a refugee camp to be set up from scratch is quite an unusual state of affairs. So normally what happens is that a refugee camp actually grows organically. People leave their homes for whatever reason. It could be something, it could be a natural disaster like an earthquake, or it could be that they're fleeing fighting or persecution, and they arrive at generally an urban centre, somewhere that they think is going to give them more opportunity, and they literally set up camp. I mean, you're talking about a stressful environment and people are afraid they're running away for a reason, so it's generally quite a chaotic process.
So oil, the very resource that should bring prosperity, has been turned into a source of conflict. There's growing international concern about the companies who knowingly drill for oil whilst putting profit before the lives of the Sudanese people.
Additionally, the International Criminal Court has issued warrants against the President of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, for war atrocities. In protest at the warrant, al-Bashir expelled all foreign aid agencies, including MSF, showing no regard for the welfare of his people.
It's not that it has been physically difficult to get to people and provide them with assistance, but the authorities make our lives difficult to do so. There are others in Darfur who have not made it to the urban centres. They are out in the rural parts of Darfur province, and it's much more difficult to get to them, mainly because fighting continues, and as a result it is difficult for us to travel around. So reaching people and providing them with assistance completely depends on how kindly the authorities look upon organisations like MSF being there and providing assistance. These situations tend to be very complicated, obviously, because we're talking about conflict, highly politicised environments, and they're difficult environments to work in and to help people in.
Genocide is the deliberate extermination of a racial, religious, or ethnic group. The international community believes genocide is happening in Sudan. Oil and religion are the main sources of conflict.
We hear the word terrorism on the news almost every day, but what does it mean, and how does this type of conflict differ from war?
Terrorism is unlawful violence directed at civilians, and it's designed to create a culture of fear in a society. Terrorist attacks are mostly caused by small groups who are motivated by political or religious conviction.
The main effect of a terrorist attack is psychological. They aim to destroy public confidence in national security. For this reason, terrorists often strike at iconic targets like the Twin Towers in New York, the London Underground, and the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania.
Terrorists are likely to use techniques like suicide bombs, kidnapping, and hijacking. They plan attacks that will affect people at random, and women and children are often victims. Terrorism is not new. Over the past 50 years, the terrorist group ETA have been active in southern Spain in an attempt to create an independent Basque state. They use kidnapping and bombing to instill fear, and over 800 people have been killed since the start of their campaign. In Northern Ireland, the Irish Republican Army, or IRA, used terrorist attacks against the British Army for decades to protest against English rule. Their tactics included the use of petrol and car bombs, executions, and tarring and feathering. In 1984, they almost succeeded in killing the then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher when they bombed a political conference.
Does terrorism work? Yes and no. Terrorism can generate publicity for a cause, but can also lose sympathy for the same cause because of the innocent people killed in the process. Governments resist negotiating with terrorists